Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Dr. Christa Uehlinger. She's an intercultural and human leadership mentor, author, and speaker, the founder of the Linking People Method, the author of Being Different Together, the co-author of the handbook, How to Be a Human, and she has also presented a very beautiful and insightful and fun TEDx talk titled The Gift of Foreignness. So this is mainly the topic of our conversation today, too, besides which has to do with her programs as well, which I have them here, the Human Leader Practice and the Human Leader Mastery that's within the Linking People Circles. What's not to love about that name? Just the title itself is just very beautiful. Thank you. Talk to me, the full bio will be at the end of this video, as always, but the first question that I love asking all my guests, I always begin like this, all my interviews, over 1,000 now. How would you introduce yourself, Christa? Who are you in your own words as of this moment?
So I would say professionally, I'm an intercultural mentor, but it's much more. I was reflecting on it. It's about being human. So the intercultural work is one part of it. So I would say I help people to be human, to connect from heart to heart and not just brain to brain. I think it's very important, especially in the Western world. And personally, I would say I'm a woman, I live in Switzerland, and I'm also a spiritual being on my journey.
Yes, how beautiful. So when you say heart to heart, not just brain to brain, I know that this is your work has everything to do with the exploration of this topic. But for the sake of this conversation, I will ask you, these open questions. So what would that look like? Or rather, like a specific question now, what would that look like? How would you describe this heart to heart interaction, human connection?
Maybe I have to say here that I also study psychosynthesis, which is a psychological approach, but which is also a so-called transpersonal approach. And there I realized for the first time, or maybe I knew it somewhere inside me, but I'm a soul in a body, and I'm on a journey on this earth. And so I started to observe this, and I realized people mainly, especially in the Western world, people are very rational. You need to give reason, you think twice, and so on. I know this world. I mean, I studied law. I know it too. And it's one part, but there's more. So I think it's very important to consider your body, because your body knows everything. Your emotions, your thoughts too. So I was really trained, focus and then check in with your thoughts, your body, your emotions. And so you have the whole person. And that's what I mean by we need to connect, we need to act from heart to heart and not only just like heads.
Does this make sense? Yeah, right. But in order to do that, we have to connect holistically with our own selves, that level of, being aware that we are a whole being and not just parts of it. It starts here, right, Christa?
Yeah, absolutely. It starts in the heart. And that's why I say I would like to see heart to heart connection. And of course, the brain and the mind helps and is part of it. But it's also a question, what role do we give our mind? Is it the controlling mind, or is it the mind serving the heart?
Right. So with that in mind, would you mind, I read that in your bio. So it says, outside of the workplace, she is equally fascinated by the inner worlds we inhabit and has been on a deeply rewarding spiritual journey to better know herself. What was that like? When did you start your spiritual journey?
I think I can share a really personal story. And I was, I think, about mid-20s, where I was in a relationship with
Yeah.
somebody coming from a different religion than me. And it was really my first deep love. And after 2 years, he broke up because I didn't have the same religion as him.
Yeah.
And it was a very painful experience at that moment. But looking back, I think that was kind of an initiation to think about. So what I did in this moment, because it was really painful. I was like reading everything about different religion, about Judaism, about Christianity, about Islam, about everything,
Yeah.
because I just had the urge to understand. And then I realized there's something higher, however you call it. And so
Yeah.
I think that was the moment where I was like starting my spiritual journey. Also, I wasn't fully aware at that time, I would say, but that was a kind of a initiation, kind of.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, right. Which has to do with exploration, investigation, the
exactly.
initiation process. It just opens this door, right, Krista, to
And then I
something.
just realized, there's an inner world which you can explore too. And of
Yeah,
course, on these journeys, you see whatever you see, and sometimes it's painful, and sometimes it's fun, and sometimes it's relieving, and yeah. So
what was the most, let's say, the deepest insight that you have gained from your spiritual journeys?
I would say I realizing that everything is connected. So we think we're not connected, again, especially in the Western world. And another one is that this incredible knowledge we have inside us, knowledge, not in books, inside us. And our body knows everything, and we can explore. And there's a whole wisdom. We hardly tap into it. So I'm fascinating how much potential a human being has. And we oftentimes not really tap into it. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Let me go to your work. So, linking people circles programs. Well, I would love to know a lot more about it. I'll ask you a lot of questions. Well, how does it work? And I know you said certified people. When can people join and all that, the process. But what was the moment where you knew that this was something that had to be realized and be here?
I think that was about 4 years ago. And I once did it offline with
Yeah.
people. And then I went abroad, and then it was like disappearing. And then suddenly I knew in my heart that I need to set it up. And, and this circle is like kind of peer group learning. And it happened because a lot of, I did intercultural training and coaching and one-to-one. And I always kind of thought, yes, okay, might be an input, but if you really want to understand other people, it's also a personal process. And so it's a process. It's not done by one training, the tick the box activity. That doesn't work in this. So my understanding of intercultural work is not, hey, okay, I need to know something about Americans, Swiss people, Chinese, Brazilian, whoever. Let's do a training for 4 hours and that's it. It doesn't work like that. And so before I already started to work in a much more process oriented way, like input, apply it, and so on. And people always told me after training, okay, what's going on? What do I do now? Because they realize it's not black and white. So that's how it all evolved. And then I suddenly realized, I mean, I'm a believer in peer group learning.
Yes.
And then I said, okay, I'm going to set up with these two circles. Maybe there will be more in the future. I don't know. But at the moment, there are these tools. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are two different kinds of programs. One that's
Yes.
titled the Human Leader Practice and the Human Leader Mastery. So what's the
Yes.
difference and how do they work?
So the difference is the human leader practice is targeting people. I mainly work with leaders from different professional fields who realize I'm working in a multicultural setting. That's what most people do today.
Yeah.
And by the way, by culture, multicultural, I don't only mean nationalities. It can also be generation and so on. That's always
Yeah.
across something, which is different than you are used to. And so this one circle is for people who say, okay, I would like to have a certain foundation here, foundational knowledge, because it needs knowledge and experience, so you can combine it and understand what's going on. And so this is a self-led circle. You can join anytime, and then it's combined with the circle meetings. And it's combined that everyone who is attending a program will be included in my Linking People community. So that's the self-led program. And the other one, that's much more the premium, the exclusive program, that's for max 12 people, which really and these are people who already have a certain foundation and want to deepen it and delve into it. And this is really like bring your question, get your answer, go back to your workplace, implement it. So that's much more also a journey together. So I started, for instance, I kicked off this program today. I was really touched because there are two Americans, and there is one guy who lives in Switzerland but has Croatian and Finnish roots. Then there is a woman who has Finnish roots and Swiss roots. There is a young lady who just finished her bachelor from Switzerland. And it was just touching to see the connection immediately happening between them. And I thought, wow, so
That's it. Yeah. That's it. Work beautifully done from my perspective. Yeah. I love what you're doing. And, I love, like I said, my perspective is spiritual, but when it comes to this intercultural, like you said, there are different layers. What is the most challenging aspect of of being around foreigners, somebody from another country, culture?
I think, I think it's the human moment where you get angry or you freak out because you're faced with foreignness or you are frustrated. I mean, for instance, I was working internationally for many years, and I always had this moment. And I only realized later when I saw, okay, that's not about me or I did something wrong or whatever. That's about two different cultures clashing.
Yes. Yeah.
And then what is always also difficult is that people look at it mainly as a problem, and then it has this heavy energy. And to me, it's actually an opportunity. It can be fun, it can be light, but it's a question of, okay, let's have a look at it. How do you do it? How do I do it? Why do we do it that way? Why do I this way? So it's making the unconscious conscious, then bridge it. And at the beginning, it needs a bit time, to become aware. And that's why you also need a certain foundation. But after a while, it's like, yeah,
Yeah, it becomes
it becomes,
natural.
yeah.
Something like you said, I have to go to the essential tips to unwrap the gift of foreignness. So this is an ebook PDF that you give for free on your website,
Yes,
anyone can download. So I'll have the link here.
absolutely.
But you do mention the number 4. I'll go through all of them, but one of them, it's really beautiful. Be curious, respectful, and open-minded. So this one, if we can start here, I know you start with don't assume sameness, which is a big one. But then,
Yes.
and I love the number 4. It's exactly what you're saying, being open. And this is something that we very much need, Christa, especially in the United States, because I'm here. that I see as a foreigner coming into this country. I remember that, I was made fun of, and a lot of Americans, they really didn't like that I had an accent. So they would be turned off and really not want to talk to me or anything like that. So I remember that. It was really clear. And it still happens all the time. I see that here. So one of the things that comes to me immediately is that, we can all be foreigners, right? If we travel, if you travel to a different land, a different country, then we're automatically a foreigner.
You're always a foreigner.
Right. So that would be that's one thing I think most people should be doing as a beautiful school way of learning these things is traveling.
Yeah.
Right. Go around the world, just to see how other cultures function, operate, that we are not really the same, but we are humans. Then it goes back to that. Everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants love, isn't it? We have these universal kind of desires that we all share. So is that something that you also mention in your programs? I wonder if you mentioned that, like traveling, getting yourself out there.
Yeah. I think you don't, I mean, of course, traveling helps a lot because I always say the world is my classroom. It's just beautiful to see different places, people. It's so inspiring to me. But I think more and more also within a country or within the US. I mean, the East Coast is not the same as the West Coast. And so they're already, and I mean, it's such a diverse country.
That's true.
So you meet the foreigner probably every day, and me too. Here in Switzerland, it's we have a lot of different nationalities also here.
True. That's a good point. Like my husband's from New York, so
Yeah.
he's very much used to foreigners, right? Because New York is such a melting pot, as they call it. But I remember him, I still see him sometimes kind of making fun or feeling a little uncomfortable around people with heavy accents that he cannot understand, especially over the phone when he calls Amazon or whatever company, and then he cannot understand the person perfectly because it's not American English per se. So he's frustrated. And that kind of surprised me because he's from New York, who's one of the most diverse states in the United States. So I just wonder why. So it goes back to what you said. I think we need to do the work within ourselves. We need to go deeper, right, within our own psyche.
And I think what I realized over all those years is that every person is different when it comes to foreignness.
Yes.
So some of them are like, maybe like your husband, like, oh, different accent. I'm like, whoops, Others might say, oh, it's a different accent, let's fly away. And they freak out at another point. So it's really interesting to see,
Yeah.
And so there's no universal approach. It's just, and that's why I love the work I do. It's so deeply human.
Right. You see, my perspective is always spiritual. My understanding is that we don't really know ourselves at a deeper level. We have not realized or recognized that interconnectedness, that everything in nature, for example, everything's so different, diverse, but it's nature. It's beautiful. I cannot really say that this plant's more beautiful than that one. They're just different. We see clearly in nature. So we are not apart from nature. That's so clear to me from a spiritual perspective.
Yeah. And I think also that I mean, we all are socialized in a certain way. That's the upbringing, and this also shapes us. So, and I think then we have another layer around us of take my example, being from Switzerland, being a woman, things like that. So this is like carefully crafted over times, and of course it also protects us. And if we are among the same people psychologically, we feel at ease.
Yes.
Within this group. And if something from the outside approaches us and is different, it's like, ooh, what's going on here?
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's really important to see.
So we are conditioned psychologically.
We are conditioned,
Yeah, right. To think in a certain way. Yeah, that's interesting to see. You're right.
I mean, I was lately, just as an example, in the park here nearby, and there were children playing and they were exploring the park. and the moms, they were sitting around, and some of them, they were like, don't do this, don't go there, it's dirty, don't do this, and be a
Yeah.
nice boy, and things like that. And that's exactly the process of conditioning of our socialization. And then you know within your world what is right and wrong and so on. And when you're confronted with another worldview, it doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And then you react, you know.
Yes. And then you see also racism. It's very clear too. That's part of that, right? You look at
Yeah.
we are conditioned to kind of judge people by their skin color, or by the hair. That's something that I have seen that in Brazil, growing up there. And then you have religion too, that plays a part as well. Oh, you're not a Christian, so you're going to hell. You're not a good
Yeah,
person.
exactly.
I mean, there's so many types of conditionings.
Yeah, or generations. You know, right now the discussion on Gen Z is different than boomers and things like that. It's always the divide, you know, and this is
Right.
sometimes kind of makes me angry, because I think, hey, we can look at it differently. We can say, hey, you're there. What do you bring in? What do you bring in? And we can bridge it and collaborate, and not as a first step say, okay, you're different and that's bad.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Yes. You see, but that requires a kind of mind that it's open and curious.
yeah.
You know, I think that's probably to me is one of the most fascinating aspect of the mind, right? The intellect that it's all about learning. So if we can access, more often that part of our minds, the intellect, how can I see this from a different perspective? Or if we can ask more questions instead of judging, it's really very much part of intelligence, and I call it divine intelligence.
And really connect with the other person, no matter who she or he is, you know.
Yes, yes.
And then explore it. And I think there is a beauty in each and every person. So I realize, so one thing which is really driving me is like, I would like to every person on this earth to be seen and heard as she or he is, because and that's something I had already as a child. I never could understand why should the person be different, you know. I looked at them and thought, interesting.
Wow. So even the conditionings didn't really change you, right, Krista? So do you think that this is something that came with you, let's say, from the soul's part of it? Do you believe in a soul, that we
Yeah.
were here in different lifetime, we had different lifetimes and
Yeah, I think so.
reincarnation?
Yeah, I think there's something in me, and I also think that's probably my purpose, to connect people to themselves, and by that to the others. So kind of reconnect, and I'm just a curious person, and that helps a lot. But that's part of it, you know.
Right. So, I wanted to ask you a question about something that I read. Another thing that I read in your bio, it says, always want to walk her talk. Krista went as far as tribal Papua, not sure how to pronounce that, where she discovered we can still communicate perfectly well without even speaking the same language.
Yes.
I would love to know more about that experience, this tribal experience.
Yes, that was very interesting, because I mean, I traveled a lot, as I said before. And then one day I thought I would like to challenge myself, you know. So I love to walk the talk. So I'm not fake news. I'm just
Yeah.
I'm honest. I'm clear there. So I thought, okay, I would like to go to a place on this earth where I don't understand the language. I don't know people. I don't know anything. And I would like to find out, how do I react to that? So then I booked a trip to Papua, which is part of Indonesia.
Yeah.
And I went on a so-called hike to tribal Papua in a valley. And it was just beautiful. I mean, those people still lived in these villages, like we we imagine indigenous people.
Yeah.
And we had a local guide, and he was very carefully introducing us and saying, no, don't do that, and things like that. So we learned a lot. So, for instance, we had porters carrying some luggages, but also our food. And the porters, they every evening they sang in their hut, and they were only male. So one evening there was another woman as curious as me. So we were asking our guide and said, "Could we join them? Because it's so beautiful how they sing." And then he said,
Yeah.
"Wait, this is a ritual. This is men only. So it's an evening ritual. But I will go and ask them." And so he went, and he was asking them, and then he came back, and they said, "Yes, you're welcome. You can sit with them." And then he told us how to sit and and just listen carefully to their ritual, to the singing of saying goodbye to the sun and things like that. Very beautifully. So that was one aspect. But the other one was that I kind of connected with one of the porters, and that's where I realized don't need the language, because within 2-3 days we kind of created our own language, by hand signs, by some words.
Yeah.
And there was just a connection. It was incredible. So when we were hiking, and he kind of felt, oh, that's a bit a difficult path. So he was immediately there to support me, and so on. And it worked very well. So I said, all this fuss around, oh, I need to learn the language because otherwise I don't understand the other person. It's just not true. There is another way to connect.
Yes, that's nonverbal, right?
That's nonverbal.
Yeah, I heard about that. That most actually we communicate non-verbally more often, right? More frequently, more than with words. That's the body language.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That must be incredible. I was just trying to imagine here, being in a place like that, especially when it's very ancient. They carry a lot of wisdom from
Yeah,
that's very natural, right? Comes very natural
absolutely.
today. Everything they do,
Yeah.
intuitive. That's powerful.
And I think a lot of indigenous people still have a much stronger connection to universe or God, or however you call it, or Father and Mother Earth than we have. So it's fascinating.
Yes, it is. And I know they are very spiritual. They carry all these rituals for a reason, because there's a lot of respect to everything. So in a way, it's very easy to see that they see the interconnectedness of it all. That they are able to detect that. They have realized the sacredness of everything.
Absolutely. And still live it. I mean,
Right.
in the Western world, I would say we lost it.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, I'm very fascinated by ritual because I think it's so important. It's a transition. It's a ritual. It's a honoring of life, and go on. And we just kind of lost it mostly.
Yeah. So going back to what you do, I want to go through the essential tips to unwrap the gift of foreignness. So that TEDx talk that you gave, it's
Yeah.
beautiful though. I love how you very much yourself. I made a comment on YouTube, and
Oh,
that's
you
what came to
did?
me. Yeah,
Ah,
you being
thank
you.
you.
Like, thank you for being you. That's very
Thank you.
inspiring. So inspiring. So you go through, I know through the TEDx talk, I think you speak of 4 aspects, but then the ebook on your website, you have 6 of them. You have the PDF with 6 tips. The
Yeah.
first one is don't assume sameness. So I like the explanation you gave here. I have that in front of me in the note because it's very interesting. You say, be aware of the illusion of similarity, such as, after all, we are all human, or we work in the same company. Expect others to think and act differently. Recognize that your way is only one of many and can be the exception rather than the norm, too. So that goes back to that amazing message of understanding, right? Going deeper into understanding yourself, knowing that we don't behave the same as everybody else, and everybody else is different. The body and the mind, the content of mind.
Exactly. And I also think it's that's a starting point, you know, starting to realize that people are different, yes.
Yes.
Because I think it's kind of natural at the beginning that you assume sameness, you know, when you interact. It's unconscious. It's not, I'm going to think, oh, I'm meeting you and you're different than me. That's not what we think. We just act as we are used to.
Yes, that's a very good point.
So it's kind of a program, you know.
Yes, that's a good point. Like in my case, for some reason, I'm always late. So I'm always very much in the moment. So it's one of my practices, and I forget about time. Time doesn't exist. Like now, I have only if I look at the clock, in which I rarely do too. So I love being in the moment, being spontaneous, being present, and not concerned with the constructed idea of time.
I think that that's a cultural difference, you know. That's one of the main cultural difference, how we relate to time.
Yes.
And that you're late, I'm not surprised. As you said, you're from Brazil, so it's a different approach to time. I mean, here in Switzerland, I learned to be very punctual because punctuality is key in Switzerland and builds up trust and so on. But now, then, when I know, I mean, I can even look it up. There are tools you can look up, and then you see somebody from Brazil, for instance, has a more flexible time approach. Somebody from Switzerland, more linear. And then if you know, you can start to work with it, you know. And then depending on the situation you're in, you can say, okay, so I might adapt. I know you're late. You might be late. Probably from your point of view, you're not really late.
Yeah, right. Because
That's important, you know.
that's true. I'm not even thinking that way. Like, oh, okay, when I look at the clock, just a few minutes, and that for me is not a big deal. It's not a big deal.
No, for you, no. But somebody like me,
Yeah.
and then you're late. From my perspective, you're late. You know, from your
Yes.
perspective, it's just a few minutes. Okay, who cares? So that's a good example of how this conditioning works.
So that's coming from condition. Do you think that that has something to do also with my spiritual practices, or not really? That's the Brazilian thing. Because I'm thinking, I lose track of time easily.
Yeah, but it actually might be both because it happens to me too. For
Yeah.
about 2-3 years, I'm like, what's
Yeah.
what's the time?
You're
Oh, I need
good.
to check where I need to go.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think it's both.
Yeah. So another one, the number 2 was tip is human to human, wholehearted interaction. Yeah, that's what you talked earlier about, the heart to
Exactly.
heart.
Yeah,
That's spiritual to me. It sounds,
absolutely.
yeah, it's beautiful. And then third is deepen your culture understanding, which we have been discussing. And this is you go
Exactly.
deeper into your
Yeah,
programs.
get some foundational knowledge because there's
Yeah.
a lot available to understand. I mean, you never will fully understand everything, but it gives you a foundation where you can connect with your experience. Because that's the
Yes.
biggest myth. A lot of people tell me I have a lot of international or intercultural experiences and they think they can handle it, but they can't really. I mean, they might to a certain degrees, but at a certain point, there's the human aspect kicking in.
So you explained how it works, the linking people circles programs, 2 of them. So the human leader practice, the human leader mastery. And that happens, that could be anyone can register for it. I know that the human leader mastery, it has to be, they have to contact you first.
Yeah.
And I know there's the complimentary call before
Yes, exactly.
registration. And how does it work when it comes to how often, what's the duration of these programs?
It's over the time of 1 year, we meet 12 times.
Ah,
So that means there are 6 topics, and for each topic we do a deep dive first, and then about 2 weeks later we do the circle meeting where we discuss situations, where we find solutions, where we see where people are, and so on. So it's always deep dive, circle. Next topic, deep
Right.
dive, circle. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And the topics are very insightful. I was reading some of them. They're very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And these are only for professionals, people who work with foreigners, like an environment with, I mean, today's world, everybody, right?
Everybody does it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. So it's for everyone who works with different
Yeah.
people from different
I
cultures.
think it's interesting. I was at one, that was an interest, that's a bit spiritual too. So I was
Yeah.
going for a high, I always said, who is my target group, target group. So, and then I figured out, yeah, I mainly work with leaders, but you know,
Yeah.
so somebody from, a marketing professional was like, okay, what kind of leaders and things like that. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
all right. Maybe they're somewhere already in a managerial position, but they
Yes.
can be in the middle or higher up. So I always have the challenge of defining. And then at one time, I went on a hike in Switzerland, and I started at the bottom of the mountain, and I went up to 2,500 meters. I don't know how many feet this is. And so I was walking up there,
Mm,
and suddenly I had this. I know who my leaders are. So they have empathy. They have I say they have a heart. They have certain sensitivity,
yeah.
and they might sense that's important, especially in the digital world, that we also pay attention to the human aspect. So they might sense it, or they might fully be aware of it. And so I just came down the mountain and wrote it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm fascinating, when I now work with people, exactly, they show a certain sensitivity and they want to personally grow.
Yeah. So I want to go back to the other tip that you give is the number 4, which I love this one. Be curious, respectful, and open-minded, as I mentioned earlier. And then 5, pay closer attention to details. So I need you to elaborate on that, Krista.
I would like to add something to open-mindedness and so on, because sometimes if you read some tips on social medias, people tell you be open-minded, do this and that, and to me sometimes I can't read anymore because it's just nothing.
Uh, yes.
It's a bit too that, because you need to live it. You need
Mm,
to. It's a kind of a daily practice to be open-minded, and you only can be open-minded if you all again in the work, if you realize when you're not, or when your open-mindedness is challenged. And that to me is open-mindedness, and not just be it. Yeah.
wow. Yeah, that's a powerful insight. When that open-mindedness is challenged, right? That's
Mhm.
when we know we need more work. We need
Yeah,
to
and sometimes
purify.
we think we're open-minded, and we actually not. There
Yes.
are those moments, and I think everybody has these moments.
Yes. So, I mean, it makes so much sense, to the rational mind and the heart, both. I love when something makes sense to my whole being. Like, okay, it makes sense to the mind, it makes sense to the heart.
Absolutely.
So that's it. It's very scientific and spiritual at the same time. So number 5, pay close attention to details.
Yes. I think what is really important is observation skills. And that's what I mean. If you
Yeah.
interact with somebody, but then again, you need to be present and connect to be able to observe. And then you can see this person might use the hand to talk, or they look on the ground and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And this, if you have the foundation, the intercultural knowledge foundation, you can tie in to what culture could play a role here. And so that's what I mean. So I find
Yes.
it very fascinating.
What would be an example of that, Krista, that comes to mind?
For instance, I was teaching in South Korea for 2 months, and I mean, in Switzerland, in the US too, you look each other in the eyes, and that builds up
Yes.
trust. And so when I was entering the classroom for the first time, the students were sitting there like this,
Looking down. Yeah.
not looking at me at all. But I know that that's a sign of respect, based on my knowledge. And I
Yes.
wouldn't go there and say, "Hey, look into my eyes."
You scared them.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. So that's an example. So
Yes.
if by entering the classroom and seeing that everybody is looking on, is no having no eye contact and even bowing a bit, and by connecting this experience with my intercultural knowledge, I could tell, okay,
Yeah.
that's actually a sign of respect, But if you don't know, it could be, what are they doing? So yeah.
Yeah.
So that's like an example. And that's why you kind of in the moment you can observe and see these details, because culture also speaks non-verbally.
Non-verbally. Yes. Right. That's also with Tibetan. Yeah, the Tibetans. I think some other people there, they bow also. They do the namaste. I
Mm-hmm.
usually do that too. Also the Chinese, Japanese and Chinese, I
Yeah.
believe in those cultures too. And some people don't understand that. Now it's becoming more like open. They know what that word means, namaste, and what that means. But yes, that could be kind of strange to some people. Yeah, that are not
Yeah,
used to it. They might interpret it differently.
exactly.
And number 6 is self-awareness is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love for you to elaborate on that too. And an example will be helpful.
Yeah, so self-awareness, what I mean here is cultural self-awareness, because as you said before, we are conditioned, we grow up, your parents tell you how to behave. So this is the cultural conditioning, socialization going on.
Yeah,
And within your own cultural group, you know how to behave. And that's like a program running. You're not aware of it, it's unconscious. You internalize it. And so the self-awareness part is to kind of become aware of your values, cultural values, to
yeah.
incorporate it, and how they show up in your daily interaction. So that's a piece to do.
Yes, that's a big one too. And in my case, is a good
Absolutely.
example of the time, right? Being
For
flexible with
instance,
time, coming from
exactly.
Brazil, but it's not really acceptable or not. Let's say it's not really something that people here in the United States like,
Mhm.
and in your culture too, right? In Switzerland.
Absolutely. Or we have in Switzerland, because of our historical background, and doesn't matter, but it has an
Yeah.
impact there. We are interacting on same eye level, and we want to be included and tell our opinion. So
Yeah.
we oftentimes ask what do you think, and so on, and that's the process. And others go like, stop talking, it's not
Yes.
necessary.
Yeah. Yes.
And we are like, no, I have something to contribute, and so clash. So yeah,
Yes. Wow. So it's a lot more complex than we can imagine, right?
absolutely.
Because, wow, this is amazing. I love your work, though. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to that calling.
Yeah, thank you.
It's truly beautiful. What's not to love about it? So we're almost at the end, Krista. I want to mention your services, one-on-one coaching, besides the circles, of course, those 2 programs that you offer. That's very clear on your website.
Yeah,
We see that clearly there. You have both of them, the human leader practice and mastery. You actually have like practice mastery. So it's very easy to navigate your
yeah,
website. Very
thank you.
simple. That's linkingpeoplecircles.com. I'll have in a clickable way on the podcast notes so they can just get there. And I want to mention also that you are a speaker. You're here for a reason. You also host workshops. And I went to your product page. You have the card game.
Yeah,
So that's puzzling intercultural stories,
exactly.
English and German,
Yeah,
both. I was curious about that. That sounds like fun too, like those
Yeah, it's fun.
cards.
It's we were collecting 70 real cases of cross-cultural
Wow.
clashes,
Yeah.
and then we choose 50, and then we deducted them to 3 lines. So it's kind of a riddle, but it's fun. It's fun. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and you also have a book. I love the title of the book, Being Different Together, but that's just in German
That's
for now.
unfortunately right now only in German. Yes.
Do you have plans for that to be
Yes,
to
I need
translate it
to.
in
I mean,
English?
it's published in the second version, and but I think I need to do a third version. So, and I hope I can do it in German and in English.
Oh, yes. Okay. So that's good to know. And you also have those free downloads, the 6 essential tips to unwrap the gift of foreignness that we just talked about.
Yes.
And then you also have an infographic. That's
Yeah.
the human model of culture. Free download as well. I downloaded myself, so I have it here too. So you are on LinkedIn, and your TEDx talk is a lot of fun. I have that, and I'll have that on the podcast links too.
Thank you.
What's not to love about what you do and in the mission? I love to see people with the sense of purpose. I guess it gives us that sense of purpose, but in truth, it's really the innate, natural, feeling of almost like a desire to connect with
Hmm.
others, which is not really others. It's almost like we are just playing here with one another, the same
Absolutely.
thing, right? Just dancing. So it's really beautiful to see you answering those calls and at a deeper level, a heart level.
Yep.
Thank you so much again for your meaningful work, and we'll talk soon. We'll be in
Thank
touch
you.
again. Would you like to add anything else, Krista, that we didn't, questions that I
No,
didn't
that's
ask?
fine. I just, what came to my mind. I don't know who stated this, but when we talked about foreigners, there's a nice quote. It's called, "A foreigner is a friend you have you yet have to meet," something like that.
Yeah, you yet have to meet,
Yeah.
right?
So I
Yes.
think
Huh.
that's kind of beautiful.
Yes. I love that too. Huh. In my memories of speaking of friendship and foreigners, when I went to France, I didn't speak the language, and it was just people. They're so friendly. You feel like we have been friends forever,
Hmm.
but we actually just met, and it
Hmm.
felt so warm.
Hmm.
Yes, that's true.
Hmm.
Huh. That is so true. Thank you so much again,
Thank
and we'll
you.
talk soon. Bye for now, Krista. Bye for
Bye.
now.
Thank you.
Thank you.